Hello, everyone. We will be starting momentarily. We have a very full house today. Going to give a couple of moments for others to start joining us. This is a very popular webinar. We had close to 1,000 registrations. Okay, the numbers are growing. I will go with the introductions, and as folks come in, I hope that they feel welcome. Greetings, everyone. I'm Paz Artaza Regan, Program Manager at Catholic Climate Covenant, and I will be moderating today's webinar. We are delighted that so many of you are joining us today to discuss the recent Laudato Si and the U.S. Catholic Church Conference that was held in Omaha, Nebraska at Creighton University. We're going to be discussing its key takeaways, summarizing what happened at the conference, and how you can be part of the implementation phase of all of the major recommendations. A little housekeeping item before we get started. The video is being recorded, and we are sending it to you with a link to the slide deck within the next couple of days. There will be a question and answer session after all the presentations. You may submit your questions by writing them in the question box on the right side panel of your screen. You may wish to indicate who the question is directed to when you submit your question. Because we are so popular today, with so many folks on the webinar, I cannot guarantee that we'll get to your question. We'll endeavor to do so, but if we do not get to it, please just send an email and we will respond to it. If you're having audio issues, it's most likely due to your Wi-Fi connection. You may try connecting via phone if you're having audio issues. GoToWebinar gives you the option to switch to phone if you wish. Just click on the audio tab in the right-hand box, and it will give you the directions for using your phone for audio. As usual, we try to begin every webinar with a moment of prayer. So if you would join me to pray at this moment and center ourselves, remembering that we're always in the presence of God. Jesus Christ, teach us to empathize with the earth. Make our spirits sensitive to the cries of creation, cries for justice from the land, the seas, and the skies. Jesus Christ, make our faith sensitive to the groans of the Spirit in creation, groans of longing for a new creation. Jesus Christ, make our hearts sensitive to the songs of our kin, songs of celebration from the sea, the forest, and the air. Christ, teach us to care. May the Spirit of God, who is above all and in all and through all, fill us with the knowledge of God's presence in earth and with the joy of Christ within us. Amen. Now we're going to get to the point of the introductions of who's going to be presenting. Joining me today to present about the various aspects of the conference are Dr. Dan DiLeo, Assistant Professor and Director of the Justice and Peace Studies Program at Creighton University and consultant with Catholic Climate Covenant, who will be giving us the big picture of why the conference happened and a general overview of the conference. Jose Aguto, Catholic Climate Covenant's Associate Director, will delve more deeply into the specific works of the tracks. Dan and I will summarize key moments from a few of the tracks that we were working on. Finally, I will give some ideas of how you can be part of the most important phase of the conference, the implementation phase, in which we integrate Laudato Si into all the U.S. Catholic Church's work. At this point, I invite Dan to start his presentation.
All right. Well, thank you, Paz, for all the introductions, and thank you for everyone for taking time to join us today. As Paz was saying, and hopefully you've seen in some of the news reports, this was an incredibly exciting, dynamic, almost overwhelming experience to have this inaugural gathering of our conference series. So hopefully you walk away today with a little bit of a sense of that energy if you weren't able to attend, and some concrete ideas and resources moving forward. Um, so since Laudato Si was published in 2015, there have been some amazing initiatives, many of which you all have been involved in and spearheading, to incorporate Catholic teaching on creation and climate change into the US Church. At the same time, however, many of us recognize that the US Catholic response to the encyclical hasn't always been commensurate with the gravity and urgency of what Pope Francis has rightly called the climate emergency. In response, and this is several years in the making. Pause. There we go. In response, the Covenant and Creighton University designed this conference series to more durably and deeply integrate the encyclical into 8 key ministries within the U.S. Catholic Church. These include advocacy, adult faith formation, creation care teams, energy management, higher education, liturgy, school education, and young adult ministry. The conference began on Thursday, June 27th, with the evening public event, the U.S. Catholic Church, Laudato Si, Creation Care, and the Climate Crisis. Most Reverend George J. Lucas, Archbishop of Omaha, welcomed participants and read a letter from the Apostolic Nuncio to the United States, communicating Pope Francis's blessing on the conference. Reverend Daniel S. Hendrickson of the Society of Jesus, president of Creighton University, then provided opening remarks about how the gathering expressed and advanced Creighton's Catholic Jesuit mission. As Father Hendrickson emphasized, the Society of Jesus has been concerned about creation care and climate change for several years. As many of you know, this is because environmental degradation and the effects of the climate crisis implicate core Christian commitments to love God and neighbor, especially the poor and vulnerable. In particular, Father Hendrickson noted that earlier this year, the Society named Caring for Our Common Home as one of its 4 new universal apostolic preferences, to which the Jesuits will pay special attention over the next decade. In keeping with that preference, Father Hendrickson outlined how Creighton continues to incorporate creation care throughout the many aspects of its apostolate, including through support of this conference series, as well as the Creighton 150 strategic plan lighting the way. Following Father Hendrickson's remarks, Most Reverend Robert W. McElroy, Bishop of San Diego, and Megan Goodwin, Associate Director of Government Relations at the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops, then discussed the U.S. Catholic response to Laudato Si. Bishop McElroy suggested several initiatives by which the Church could more adequately care for our common home, and Ms. Goodwin described several climate change advocacy initiatives by the USCCB. The session was facilitated and moderated by Martha Scholsky, Director of the Nebraska State Climate Office. On Friday and Saturday, participants attended 4 plenary addresses. The first, Spirituality and Conversion, was facilitated by Aaron Lothus Biviano, Associate Professor of Theology at the College of St. Elizabeth. Dr. Lothus considered how the Church's implementation of Laudato Si must essentially be a response to what Pope Francis in Laudato Si calls, quote, an ecological conversion, whereby the effects of one's encounter with Jesus Christ become evident in their relationship with the world around them, end quote. The second plenary, What is Happening to Our Common Home, was led by Martha Scholsky, Director of the Nebraska State Climate Office. Dr. Scholsky outlined the science of climate change and underscored the closing window of opportunity within which humanity might avoid potentially irreversible runaway global warming. The third session, Love in Action, featured Father Kenneth R. Himes, Professor of Theology at Boston College. Father Himes outlined what the U.S. Catholic bishops call the 2 feet of love in action, that is to say, local charitable works and systemic social justice, and he considered what those might look like through an ecological lens. The fourth plenary, Climate Justice, was led by Jacoby Wilson, Associate Professor of Applied Environmental Health at the University of Maryland, College Park. Dr. Wilson passionately described how the harmful effects of environmental degradation and climate change are usually borne by marginalized communities that are often disproportionately ones of color. In addition to the plenary addresses, participants heard two outstanding evening keynote addresses. The first, Integral Ecology and Laudato Si, was given by Father Jostrom Isaac Carithodum, coordinator of the Sector on Ecology and Creation in the Vatican's Dicastery for Promoting Integral Human Development. Father Josh emphasized the need to practically implement Pope Francis's encyclical and suggested some of the key Vatican initiatives being considered by which to do so. The second keynote address, Stories of Ecological Conversion in Action, was given by Sister Patricia Seaman, prioress of the Adrian Dominican Sisters. Sister Pat highlighted how her community, like so many U.S. Catholic communities of women religious, has holistically integrated Laudato Si into its ministry as but the latest of its decades-old commitment to care for God's creation. After each plenary address, participants attended topical breakout sessions about how to more deeply integrate insights from the preceding talk into one of the 8 identified U.S. Catholic ministries. Each session was guided by a team of experienced professionals, including those from the USCCB and Catholic Relief Services, and produced dynamic ideas as the fruit of thoughtful, often candid, conversation and discernment. As we hope you've seen, the conference has gotten extensive positive Catholic media coverage. Although we think these pieces capture much of the excitement and energy from the conference, we know that in many ways the gathering's most critical work is only now beginning. Following this initial gathering, track leaders have already begun working with Covenant staff and the Creighton community to develop and implement new ministry-specific resources and initiatives with which to more deeply integrate Laudato Si and Catholic climate change teaching into the U.S. Church. The Covenant is excited to share some of these initial ideas with you here today, and are grateful to all of our partners, especially Creighton University, for their ongoing collaboration to realize the potential of this first groundbreaking conference series event. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you for that great summary and keeping great time. Jose, you're up next.
Thank you, Paz, and thank you everyone for joining our conference call. And I wanted to give you
Jose?
Sorry. Yes, I'm sorry. I just got back on. I apologize. I was talking on mute. Thank you. I wanted to share with you subsequent layers of the conference. We, as Dan mentioned, had 8 tracks, and the intention of these tracks is to discern strategically how we can weave green threads across Catholic ministries. And so our track leaders were selected based on their placement or their championing of climate initiatives within their parishes, schools, dioceses, or within their national organizations, so that they can take the initiatives coming and the ideas coming from their tracks and implement them moving forward. As Dan may have mentioned, this is part of a 5-year effort, and so we will be systematically working with these track leaders and participants and people and institutions like you to ensure that we are weaving green threads across the U.S. Catholic Church in spirit, word, and deed. I'm first going to talk about some of the overarching challenges and themes that came out of the conference, and then drill down into some of the take-homes that many of the tracks developed, and then hand it off back to Dan and Paz for their discussion of the tracks in which they participated. Pause, I regret that. Oh, here we go. Sorry. Okay, thank you. So some of the overarching challenges that were recognized across the conference is that care for creation is not a top priority within the U.S. Catholic Church. That climate change can be viewed as a political, not moral issue, and that so many Catholic institutions and individuals are doing great work to care for creation and each other, but we're not sharing that information, nor are we coordinating or collaborating well enough as one Holy Catholic and Apostolic Church. And so one of the major overarching themes is that we need to ground ourselves in the Holy Spirit. We need to ground ourselves in our Catholic faith, in our thoughts, our prayers, our words, and our deeds in seeking climate solutions. This is our unique faith, our unique ability to transcend the partisanship and the bitter divides, and is necessary for us as a church and also as a human community to heal. So if we move ourselves from the place of the gospel, from the place of the greatest commandment, then we are moving properly and are helping heal our world. So going to the particulars of some of the themes programmatically or operationally, we find that there's a need for us to share information more and to create clearinghouses and networks for all of the great work that is being done across the U.S. Catholic community. We need to coordinate and collaborate within our tracks. And in that coordination and collaboration, use existing best practices and organizations to lift up the mission, to catalyze and proselytize their missions, and where appropriate, create new entities. As Dan mentioned, we need to integrate Laudato Si into existing ministries and programming, and this is going to require funding, which we will work with partners to seek out, because funding means intentionality of purpose. And we recognize that a lot of organizations are doing a lot of work already, and that additional funding is needed to bolster this new dimension of their work. We also need, I think, most importantly here, is to build relations with church leaders on these issues, because it has not yet been viewed by some church leaders as a priority. But we, each one of us, need to engage our pastors and bishops to urge them to consider this more fully in their ministries. I start with this slide because I'm going to move now into reporting out on 6 of the tracks and their next steps, but it applies to all, that faith transcends partisanship. And I think many of us who care about creation and care about our common home are distressed by the hatred and partisanship that is engulfing our nation right now. But in order to change the hearts and minds of others, we need to do so from a faith-filled and a moral perspective. And this is reflected by some statements by the USCCB that this is not a partisan issue or an economic issue. It's one about the future of God's creation and the one human family. And so we, from this conference, operate on the need to change hearts, both within ourselves and amongst others, strengthened by our faith. And this leads me now to the first of the tracks, and that's the advocacy track, led by Megan Goodwin of USCCB, Ray Burnell of the California Catholic Conference, and Chris Kerr of the Ignatian Solidarity Network, their executive director. That some of the top priorities are that we all recognize that our top action priority is to reduce global greenhouse gas emissions and transition our world to renewables and to reduce fossil fuel use. And in doing so, to lift up the U.S. Catholic Church, that we need to build relationships with our bishops and pastors and call for them to be more mindful and to act on climate change. We also need to explore the creation of a Catholic climate advocacy organization like Catholic Education Partners, and to galvanize the Catholic spirit to act on climate through moments. And in this regard, we already have an action for you to consider. The leaders of this track and others who participated in the track are now organizing around the galvanizing moments happening this September and October related to the season of creation, the climate strikes, the UN Climate Summit, the Feast of St. Francis, and the enduring support of many Catholic institutions for the Paris Agreement that is reflected through the Catholic Climate Declaration, which is on our website, and the International Climate Accountability Act. So we right now are exercising our newfound collaboration and spirit to galvanize the U.S. Catholic Church and various organizations who are interested in advocating. So as we are developing the strategy quite quickly, if you're interested, please email conference at catholicclimatecovenant.org to be included in these efforts moving forward in the coming weeks and months. Now moving to adult faith formation, the group there discerned that they need to build a holistic program that advances Laudato Si across the 4 stages of evangelization, and the need to integrate Laudato Si through every aspect of adult faith formation, including liturgy, sacramental preparation, Bible study, and community outreach. And then we also need to catalog and critique and disseminate current resources for those discerning entry into our faith. With regards to energy management, the first is to start small, to slowly engage parish communities and buildings and other Catholic facilities and schools with regards to community gardens and lights and ceiling windows and doors. It's a good way to a small entryway into having these discussions so that our Catholic building community can collectively reduce their greenhouse gas emissions. We also need to be mindful of our partnership and fellowship with those who are poorer than ourselves, and so how do we figure out ways to share our savings? Also, the third bullet, to access the expertise and scholarship of Catholic universities through their students to work closely with Catholic schools and other institutions in the area to help guide them through energy management and energy efficiency and renewable energy. And then lastly, to connect and train with creation care teams. And I take a brief moment to note that, for example, the Catholic Energies program, which is part of Catholic Climate Covenant, just recently partnered with the Immaculate Conception Church in Hampton, Virginia, that allowed them to switch to 100% solar and not paying $1 for that service. And most recently, also, the Catholic Energies working with Catholic Charities in Washington, D.C., in the construction of a field of solar panels, which will be the largest solar array in Washington, D.C., which will allow 12 buildings held by Catholic Charities to be carbon neutral. Thank you. With regard to liturgy, some of the leading liturgists in our country recognize Sunday Mass as being the only time that parishioners often encounter God in church, in community, and with intentionality. Therefore, there's great potential within the liturgy to look into Laudato Si. So they are examining the existing liturgy in ways to integrate care for creation themes into the homilies, the missal, the prayers, the symbols, and for example, using plants instead of cut flowers to create that atmosphere that is closer to creation. And you're seeing again this persistent theme of creating a clearinghouse of resources and also developing a network of liturgists to create the weaving for these intentions. With regard to school education, there have been fantastic practices already being undertaken in schools and dioceses and nationally. And we have these champions leading our track. For example, Kate McGarry-Vassi of Saul Point High School, she and her peers implementing Laudato Si across the curriculum to the point where the high school students who were being given exit interviews all knew what Laudato Si was all about. And Peggy Reel from the Diocese of Toledo creating, among other things, a professional development course with high school teachers on ways that they can implement Laudato Si across the curricula for their students. And then lastly, the National Catholic Education Association recently came out with a STREAM initiative, which is an extension of STEM that includes religion and arts into the curriculum of Catholic schools. They made a specific mention of Laudato Si. So in a way, this is a blessing or a white paper or a policy involvement within the Catholic school community to implement Laudato Si. And so we will seek funding and seek to collaborate with local universities and communities in immersion programs to build out this programming. And noting one of those. Lastly, young adult ministry. Many of the participants, of course, were young adults and full of ambition and energy, and God bless them. We really hope to implement their far-reaching aspirations. So we again need to coordinate and collaborate across the many Catholic institutions engaged in youth and adult ministry. They seek to persuade 25 Catholic colleges and universities to divest or engage in the process of divestment, to work to have 10 U.S. dioceses have Laudato Si offices, staff, and a network across dioceses, to lead on a moral bipartisan basis for advocacy for federal climate solutions, to do a voter-based education tour on Laudato Si, and to create a march for all life led by young adults. Okay, we already went through that, I apologize. And just from a place of faith, I want to put this out there in particular because in this particular time, in this moment, this epochal moment in civilization, now is as a most important time for us to seek the imitation of Christ within ourselves and among others. I believe it's the only way that we are able to transcend the differences that we have and to seek a shared and common and loving and thriving future. So I hope that we will continue to live our ministry more fully within our U.S. Catholic Church and see the solutions that we seek, and to be champions within ourselves and among ourselves, and lift up St. Francis's prayer as a strengthening prayer as we move forward together in this work. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jose. That was an excellent summary of the tracks. At this point, Dan, will you do higher education for us, please?
Sure. So I was one of the facilitators of the higher ed track, along with two of my colleagues here at Creighton, Eileen Burke-Sullivan, who's Vice Provost for Mission and Ministry, and Belina Bentledge, who's our Sustainability Coordinator. And so we had wonderful conversations, and so I'm just going to try and hit the high points so you get some sense of how those conversations went. In terms of integration, there was an overall sense that the integration of Laudato Si has been modest, that there has been a lot that's been done, but there is a whole lot more that could be done given both the scope and the resources of Catholic higher education. When you think about curriculum, facilities, advocacy, all of the different areas of Catholic life that universities touch and are involved in. So there was also a sense that integration wasn't always explicitly connected to mission, that for many universities, they're doing sustainability work, but it's not always explicitly communicated as coming from and being animated by their Catholic mission. So I think that was an important thing to note in terms of integration. We talked a lot about integration factors, both positive and negative, and we identified several that seem to be common among both successes as well as some of the roadblocks and challenges. The first, and these first two really, I think, go together, are encounter and relationships. Pope Francis has spoken so many times about the culture of encounter, and in Laudato Si speaks about the three relationships for which people were created: with God, with neighbors, and with the earth itself. And so we found that at universities, places that have deep spirituality understood as relationship with God, places that have relationships with marginalized communities, that have direct encounter with the victims of environmental degradation and climate change, places where there's a sense of cultivating encounter and transformational relationship with creation, that these were the places where there was a lot going on in response to Laudato Si, and obversely where these things were missing, there was a lack of integration of Laudato Si and some of its insights. One of the integrating factors was integral ecology, the understanding that everything is connected. Universities are often criticized for their siloed nature, that departments, divisions, Sometimes colleges within a university don't always speak together or speak to one another. And so there was a recognition that interdisciplinary conversations were one of the facilitating factors in terms of integrating Laudato Si and in places where there wasn't this cross-pollination, that there wasn't a whole lot of integration of the encyclical, which is not surprising because this is one of the themes of Laudato Si and of early apology. One of the integration factors was certainly champions, and this was multivariate in the sense that champions often come from the grassroots, students, faculty, and staff. Sometimes they come from the top in terms of administrators who are leading, but inevitably there have to be administrators who are at the very least supporting grassroots initiatives to try and increase sustainability and connect it to mission. So champions was a theme throughout. Finances was certainly one. Places that had holistic understanding of economics, that considered more than short-term ROI, return on investment, were places that were taking a more integrated approach to sustainability issues. And so finances was a big theme. And I think the last one, which we spent a lot of time on, was mission formation, especially of administrators. And I think what we discussed and discerned was that there was success integrating Laudato Si in places where the fullness of Catholic social teaching is seen as integral to Catholic faith, and where evangelization is adequately understood to require action that's guided by Catholic social teaching. And we saw a lot of challenges in places where the church's social mission is either selectively engaged or seen as kind of an optional add-on. And where evangelization is narrowly understood as speaking about Jesus rather than properly as both speaking and acting, which is how the Second Vatican Council describes evangelization and the vision of evangelization that Pope Francis is trying to recover. So I think mission formation, especially of administrators, was a big topic that we talked a lot about. And I think this is broader than just higher ed, because I think these are challenges within the U.S. Catholic Church more broadly. So in terms of pathways forward, we've talked about several, and you know, every university, every college is different, so there is no one size that fits all. One of the pathways forward, though, seem to be into integration with Catholic Energies. So as Jose mentioned, this is the Covenants program that helps Catholic facilities install solar energy. We provide turnkey services that include project design, management, and most importantly, capital financing. So we actually secure the capital and the financing to be able to do these projects. So Catholic Energies was a big potential pathway forward. Another one that we talked about was a theologian, scientist, diocesan speaking tour, kind of inspired by a sense of the university wanting to serve the local church. This might be something analogous to our ambassador program, if you're familiar with that through the Covenant. And this would be a bishop-supported speaking tour where a theologian and a scientist could go to a number of parishes and essentially help people to understand the theology, the science, and then also some of the actions that people can take around Catholic teaching on climate change. Another pathway was environmental justice orientation. So this is something that we've pioneered here at Creighton University. It's a day-long formation for faculty and staff. We start with an overview of Catholic social teaching, and then we go and visit a coal-fired power plant in predominantly African-American part of town. We talk with people, we talk with policymakers throughout the day. And so we try and facilitate this encounter within the context of Catholic faith and identity. And then the last are potential engagement with a number of the formation offerings through the Association of Catholic Colleges and Universities. So they've got a number of programs for mission officers, for new presidents, for members of boards and trustees. So I think there are existing organizations and structures that we could engage with to more deeply integrate Laudato Si. So there was a lot that came out of the higher ed track. Hopefully this gives you just a little bit of the flavor of some of the conversations that we had.
Thank you, Dan. I'm going to talk a little bit about the Creation Care Team track. There were over 30 folks at the Creation Care Team track, and we heard from the 4 groups that we identified as best practices. The Sisters of St. Joseph, the Archdiocese of Atlanta, St. John Newman in Reston, Virginia, and the Diocese of Stockton's Environmental Justice Program. Each of them was speaking to the plenary topic: spirituality, the sisters; science, the Archdiocese of Atlanta with their action plan, where they uh, went with the university scientists to create a plan of action for the Archdiocese. St. John Newman, that is a pilot type of project in the Arlington area. They have done amazing work, and they have then connected with others in the diocese. And then the Diocese of Stockton, which is the only place that has a only environmental justice focused type of a program. And here you'll have the links to each of them to learn a little bit more. The key takeaways from this track are that CCTs is really the best strategy or path for what we call vertical integration of Laudato Si. If we are really going to see Laudato Si integrated throughout the church, it is in these small teams at a local level, whether they be in a parish, a school, a university, a Catholic hospital, Catholic non-profit, a diocese, that can really start delving into the issues, making the changes, and moving that entire community forward. Key takeaway number 2 is that the creation care teams will flourish when there is both a directive from above, so hierarchical, saying, yes, this is something that needs to happen, combined with a strong lay and religious community leadership. When those two things are there, you have vibrant and working creation care teams. Number 3, the sisters are leading. The women religious have been at this for decades, and now they are really showing how creation care teams can really start from spirituality, move into teaching of the science, move over to doing love in action, and also being an accompanying and in solidarity with vulnerable and impacted communities. Key takeaway number 4, there are several dioceses that are emphasizing the work of creation care teams and providing resources and assistance. Those dioceses are going to be the ones that we will put forward as models for others to be able to emulate. So what is needed in the future? Engaging, connecting with youth is huge. We cannot have creation care teams that are just being run by retired adults. It really needs to be intergenerational. Sharing the resources of the successes of what has worked. Having resources for pastors to preach on eco-spirituality and Laudato Si. Resources that move the church to a much deeper spiritual connection with creation. Uh, we provide resources for study on Laudato Si, for carbon footprint reduction, but there is a hunger for this much deeper spiritual connection that the creation care teams could be the ones that move that forward. Establishing networks between CCTs. There's a huge burnout factor. Folks feel alone. We need to be able to connect creation care teams in the same city, in the same state, region, and for that there has to be both inter and intra-diocesan networking, and that is in the process of happening. Expanding the creation care team program. At the moment, there are 360 registered creation care teams with a number of parishes, schools, etc. in the Catholic Church. It is a very small program. It needs to grow, and it needs to expand its work to work with impacted communities, the environmental justice component, and to do more advocacy. So now that we have sort of given you the overview of what happened at the conference, I'm going to switch a little bit to the implementation phase. And you've heard the report of everything we've done. And you, though, you are the key, the most important part of the conference. Whether you were physically with us or only with us in spirit, you are the real engine of all the takeaways from this conference. No matter your role or your position in the church, you are what will make the recommendations possible. You living Laudato Si and spreading its message will be the main reason we succeed in implementing Laudato Si throughout the institution. So, what can you do? First and foremost, pray, connect with God and creation. This is critical. Just as the conference started by centering ourselves in spirituality, so must we in our personal lives. Our creation care work is because of where we encounter God in all creation. It is through prayer and encountering God in creation that we change the way we perceive ourselves in relation to creation. And that really is the key to finding the solutions to climate crisis. Read and study Laudato Si. There you'll have the links to all the study guides. Uh, you do it personally, do it with your family, do it with your faith community. Stay informed. We will be updating you periodically on how you can be involved. We've given some ideas before, we'll give you a little bit more, but it is through institutional advocacy uh, or and also U.S. legislative, executive advocacy, state advocacy that we will see changes. We need you to take action and to activate your networks to take actions. Make personal changes. Have you looked at your own carbon footprint? None of us can be perfect in this area, but all of us can make the lifestyle changes that are needed. And we give you the links to get you started. Start the conversation, share this information. Dialogue and conversation about the issues of climate change have been shown to be the best way to make a difference. We need to let everyone in our circles know that because of our faith, we care about creation, because we care about how the most vulnerable will be affected, and that as Catholics, we have the moral duty to respond to the climate crisis. Let's make society think of Catholics as the climate change folks, just as they already connect us with other critical life issues. Find allies and support systems. One of the things I kept hearing at the conference was the thank you for bringing people together who shared these deep commitment. Meeting and healing was energizing, they said. Find those peoples that you can connect with and find strength. That is crucial. Advocate for institutional changes. Start where you are, whether it's your local parish, your college, university, your religious community, your diocese, your Catholic nonprofit or organization. Talk with others as to how your community can implement Laudato Si. I especially urge you to talk to your pastor, your bishop, your diocesan office staff. Contact us if you're ready to install solar panels and commit to big energy reductions. So I'm going to have here the link to the creation care teams. Are you a part of a creation care team? Does your community have one? Are you registered with us? These are really how you get all of these actions started in your community. It's also how it gives you community to keep going and doing this kind of work. Once you register, you'll receive toolkits and you'll receive a monthly email to keep you going. Get involved. So the opportunities that are coming up, Jose has spoken a little bit about them, but I would say that in the next couple of months, you have the opportunity for this coming up. Register to download the program that will be a complement to the Amazonian Synod, which is the next thing. During the entire month of October, the secular and religious press will be covering the Amazonian Synod. A lot of the issues of integral ecology and climate change and rainforest preservation will be talked about. There will be advocacy opportunities that you need to be following up. Jose spoke to them. They will always be within that link. There are new bulletin blurbs available. You can download those and put them in your bulletin every week, I mean. Homily helps to go and have a conversation with your pastor about these issues. Lots of Laudato Si resources, Catholic energies. As I said, you will be receiving the slide deck and you will have all of these uh, links. So exactly almost 2:44, we are doing wonderful. So let me go here to questions and see where we are. Jose and Dan, we received a lot of questions at the very beginning that have to do with uh, specific actions that dioceses are doing, and also how do we move that hierarchy in the bishops, the hierarchy, to care more about these issues. I will let the two of you respond, and if I need to, I'll come in at the end if I have anything else to add. So Jose, why don't you go first?
Okay, thank you, Paz. Well, first to note that there are many dioceses and archdioceses that are already doing fantastic work. And again, it is part of our mission to be able to collect those and share those with you. I think just offhand right now, the Archdiocese of Atlanta, Archdiocese of Boston, Diocese of Toledo, Burlington, Fresno, Orange County, just tremendous work being done on those diocesan levels, and we hope to get that information back to you soon. To the question of how to how to sort of lift this up within your diocese and with your pastors, you may have heard this theme, and Dan, I welcome you to elaborate. It is very important for you to establish relationships with your pastors and bishops and lift this up and to have conversations with them so that it does become a priority. This is one of the major themes that we talked about, and it is the way in which we lift up creation care within the U.S. Catholic Church. So it is incumbent upon us, as Paz insisted, we are the agents of change. Dan, any further elaboration?
Yeah, I think a couple of things. One, to reaffirm what you said, I think for me and certainly I think for folks in the higher ed track, what came through in spades for us was the importance of relationships. Because if you look at all of the success stories and all of the narratives and the experiences, they always started with, well, so-and-so talked to so-and-so, and based on that conversation, they did X. And I think, we know this just intuitively, but I think it was important to hear again and again and again that this really does come down to personal relationships. And our executive director, Dan Misla, always asks the question, what's your relationship like with your fill in the blank, with your pastor, with your bishop, with your superior, with your CFO? Have you gotten coffee with them? Have you gone to lunch with them? Have you talked to them about why you care about this issue? If not, I think it's going to be a pretty uphill battle in terms of trying to elevate this on the priority list within your particular community. So it sounds cliche, but it is so for a reason. I think relationships are the absolute key to this, which is, again, the culture of encounter I think Francis is trying to build. I think two other points, well, maybe a couple of other points in response to that. One is to help people see Catholic social teaching more broadly as an essential response to relationship with God. As I said, I think what came through clearly in the higher ed track is that Catholic social teaching is the best kept secret for many because it's seen as an optional add-on, because the faith is understood as personal piety and speaking about Jesus instead of requiring difficult multifaceted action in the areas of charitable works and social justice. And so I think helping people to understand Catholic social teaching is essential to the fullness of faith is one of the keys to this. I think two other things that I've personally had success in, one is connecting climate change to other issues that are already priorities. The nice thing, or maybe the not nice thing about climate change is that it touches everything. It touches life, immigration, economics, food. So help people to make those connections. And then I think the last thing is to help people see the depth and the richness of the church's teaching on climate change. It didn't just begin with Francis and Laudato Si in 2015. In 1990, John Paul II talked about this in his World Day of Peace message. Benedict XVI repeatedly addressed climate change. The US bishops had a pastoral in 2001. So this is deeply rooted in the fullness of the Catholic faith. And so helping people to see that this isn't just a recent phenomenon spurred by Francis, I think is also important. So a lot of challenges certainly, but I think there are a lot of ways to begin to build bridges and break down some of those barriers in particular communities.
Jose, do you have anything to add to that great summary there?
No, well said. Well said. Thank you, Dan.
Yeah. A couple of questions about how all of this rollout implementation, how we're going to seek to work with ecumenical alliances and connect with non-Catholics that might be wanting to work with us. Jose?
I will admit to having a very strong Catholic-centric focus here in recognition of the fact that we have 75 million Catholics, 17,000 parishes, 6,600 parochial schools, hundreds of hospitals, 220 plus Catholic universities, and thousands of Catholic organizations. And we are all unified through our shared sacramental worship as one body, one bread in Christ. And we are also led by Pope Francis and the other popes and a deep theological tradition that we collectively need to lift up. And the beauty of the hierarchy of our church is that by accessing and animating across the church from the top down to the bottom up, we are capable as a church to move the needle of the moral compass within this nation towards climate action. So this very strong intentionality to, for example, see that the 2 million students in our Catholic parochial schools can now get instruction on Laudato Si is a huge focus on us. And we, the church, have not yet fully embraced Laudato Si. So it is our mission first to sort of work within our house to build a stronger foundation for our shared future.
Thank you. I will add that through the creation care teams, we do promote a lot of working ecumenically at the local level, getting resources at the state level from your state interfaith Power and Light. As the Covenant, as a national organization, we can't really be in all 50 states and US territories. And it's those entities that can help in that regard. So I'll put that plug there.
I think the other, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Here, question. Go ahead.
I was going to say one other collaboration with secular entities that I think is so important is the science community, because I think one of the things that at least I've experienced in my work, but also at the conference, is that people, Catholics, still don't appreciate the gravity and the urgency of this issue. And so, as you saw from our conference schedule, we had Martha Shulsky, who's the director of the Nebraska State Climate Office, come and be one of our keynote speakers to help us understand the science. And as the U.S. bishops wrote about in 2001, so much of the church's teaching on climate change hinges on prudence, right? Reason applied to action. And if we don't understand the science, if we can't use our reason in response to the facts, then our response is going to be inadequate in some sense. So I think in addition to some of the secular environmental organizations, I think the church has to continue and frankly, even more so, has to engage with the science community to help people really understand it in a way that's not overwhelming, but is sober and candid about where we are.
Thanks. There was a question for clarification on divestment. Somebody wanted to know exactly what you meant by divestment. They weren't sure what people were being asked to divest from.
Oh, great question. That verb has a lot of nuances within the climate community. So that's a larger question, and I can direct you to the folks who are help leading that. But sometimes it's a full divestment from fossil fuels, or partial development from or partial divestment from particular kind of fossil fuels. So there's a lot of nuance there. So I can't answer that question directly, but can direct you to the folks who are working more closely on that.
We'll in private send those that information as to who to get that info then. Okay. This is a question, I think, for Dan. You talked about the higher ed networks and the question is, do those networks already exist so that if somebody who's interested in connecting, especially with smaller Catholic colleges, would be able to do so?
So the networks, the short answer is yes, although it depends. So there is the Association of Catholic Colleges and Universities, ACCU, which is the national body of the more than, I think, 220 Catholic colleges and universities in the United States, and so they are the overarching body. In addition to ACCU, there are some order-sponsored organizations, for example, the Association of Jesuit Colleges and Universities, AJCU. There's the Association of Franciscan Colleges and Universities, and so in addition to the Catholic network, there are also kind of charism-specific networks of colleges and universities sponsored by organizations. And then within higher ed itself, because higher ed is so diverse, there are networks of people working in facilities and operations. There are networks of faculty who can connect on syllabi. There are networks of sustainability directors and sustainability office coordinators. So there are a lot of networks that are kind of discipline specific. ASHE is kind of the secular body, Association for Sustainability in Higher Education, that beyond the Catholic community kind of coordinates sustainability initiatives within US higher education. So there are a lot of different networks, and it depends on what someone's looking for, either faith-based or charism specific or profession specific. But yeah, there are a lot of resources that exist, and we can certainly connect people with particulars if they're interested in that.
Right. I'm going to go back a little bit on the question regarding ecumenical alliances. There is already an ecumenical alliance that the covenant works through, and that's the National Religious Partnership for the Environment that brings together Jewish, mainline Protestant, evangelicals, and Catholics to work on these issues. So do know that that does happen at that level as well. There was a question on how to get more information on Catholic Energies, and when you get the slide deck, you will have the link for Catholic Energies, but it's catholicenergies.org if you're interested in that. The other questions, let me see, I'm trying to find here one that, let's see. Oh yes, there were a couple of questions on whether or not we were going to be working with African Catholic churches, and I think that the answer for that, Jose, is if we talk a little bit about the caucuses that we worked on with environmental justice and Latino. I think that would be how we respond to that question. Do you want to take that one?
Yes, thank you, Paz. Yes, in addition to our tracks, we had two caucuses, the Environmental Justice Caucus and the Latino Outreach Caucus. And for the EJ caucus, 40 people attended. That was a huge number of people in a standing and sitting room only caucus that met twice. And it is our intention to encounter environmental people of color communities that are suffering environmental justice in an authentic and respectful way, and to figure out how we better educate the Catholic community on what environmental justice is. And so we will have monthly conference calls to continue to glean what that means operationally in terms of a true, genuine encounter. And I have already been reaching out to relevant organizations and departments within the USCCB, as well as the National Black Catholic Clergy Caucus, and Black and Indian Mission and Native American Mission within our church. So that is an evolving and exciting new development that has come out of the conference.
Thank you. I did get someone who said we need to be careful with our acronyms, and I think that might have been directed at me. NRPE means National Religious Partnership for the Environment, and I'll try to speak slower. Apologies for that. Last question, and it gets woven in several of the questions, and I know that we have responded to this in other webinars, and it is the whole question about emphasizing climate change and creation care as one of the pro-life and consistent life issues. And they wanted to know, several folks wanted to know if that has percolated up in the conference.
I mean, it certainly was a conversation in the higher ed track. I mean, it's part of the broader conversation about Catholic social teaching, because in the church's social tradition, all of the issues are connected, which again is what Francis keeps talking about with respect to integral ecology. Everything is connected. And so, as I said, and as you all well know, I mean, ecology and climate change specifically are connected to every other issue. So all the different themes of Catholic social teaching, respect for human life and dignity, the option for the poor and vulnerable, promotion of the common good, all of these things. So the short answer is yes, it's connected, and statistically, quantitatively, climate change is and will continue to produce fatalities around the world disproportionately in those communities that are least responsible for causing climate change. So Pope Benedict has repeatedly talked about ecology as a life issue, and so this is again woven into the authenticity of the Church's social teaching. All of these issues are connected.
Thank you. Now, because it's 3 o'clock, in fact, a minute after, we're going to close the questions. If we haven't answered yours, I will respond. If I fail to do so, send me an email and remind me. I want to thank you all for being here. If you thank my colleagues for participating in this webinar. For more information, I have put here the link to the website for the conference. We will be updating it with the slide decks for the presentations and with the audio presentations, and also the email if you have any questions that are conference related. At this point, I wish you a very wonderful rest of your day. Thank you for joining us, and God bless.
God bless you, Paz. Thank you.
Thank you.